The sell side, it's really simple. Title is there to make sure that they're transferring the property from seller to buyer, and that in the in-between, one, that seller owns it, and two, that anything that's owed against the property, a lien, a judgment, a mortgage, an encumbrance, a utility, whatever it is paid off. And so they do a title search, and they search against the seller, make sure that there's no child support that's owed or anything. And they also do it for the property. And then once that comes up, they're going to reach out to you on behalf of that seller and say, hey, we found X, Y, and Z. You need to talk to your seller and provide us with answers for X, Y, and Z in the form of a mortgage payoff or some sort of settlement arrangement for child support, for example, like whatever it may be. Yeah. So all of that, I would let them know, no problem, but this is the way it works. When title report comes in, we can circle back on that.
This is listed for this much. So if it doesn't appraise for that much, there's that appraisal gap, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what happens in the event that you're under contract and the house is listed for 200, but let's just say it appraises for only 195? What happens?
If you're under contract for 200 and the buyer has a appraisal contingency that states the house will appraise for 200 or more, or the buyer then has the option of voiding the contract, walking away, and getting their deposit fully refunded. What generally happens in those situations is that if it's that close, it's usually one of three things. The buyer just walks away, or the buyer comes up with more money, or the seller comes down on the price, or they meet in the middle. And a $5,000 gap, usually you're able to make that work. Bigger gaps become bigger hurdles. But assuming it's a normal transaction and normal addendum, what it means is the buyer has the opportunity and the option to terminate the contract and get their money back.
And that meeting in the middle, that negotiation, what paperwork goes into that?
That would just be a change in terms addendum that states, hey, purchase prices changed from 200 to 197.5, for example. And then what's going to happen is when the lender is working with the buyer and they see that new price and that appraiser, they're going to say, hey, we're still willing to give you a loan of 175, but you now have to bring more money to the table to close, right? So that's why if you had a listing and you had two offers, one was a conventional loan where the person was putting down 20%, and one was an FHA loan where the person was putting down 3.5%, and they had zero extra money on top of that, you would always go with the conventional, because even if it appraises for a little bit less, buyer A can still get a loan of some sort. Whereas buyer B is really, they can't do anything. There's nothing less than 3.5% that they can put, and they don't have any extra cash to bring to the table. So the seller is stuck coming all the way down, or the deal falls apart. Whereas option A, they have cash, or they can get a 15% down loan, or a 10% down, or 5%. There's more wiggle room in those types of scenarios. So those types of buyers are better from the seller's perspective than somebody who's barely making it by. If everything works out perfectly, it's all well and good, but there's not a lot of room for error. Whereas the first scenario, there's room for error. And with like a cash buyer, there's tons of room for error, right? There is no appraisal. Like they don't care what it appraises at. They might not even have an appraisal. There's way more room for error as you go from cash buyer to conventional to 10% conventional to 5% conventional to FHA or even VA or whatever the case may be.
That's why a lot of times it's always better to have a conventional buyer than it is FHA.
Yeah, there's just more room for error. So the sell side is a lot of waiting and reacting. When you are working with the seller, you are marketing the property, showing it, negotiating, getting it under contract. After that is a lot of waiting and a lot of just making sure that the buyer is hitting their dates. Title should be ordered within the first 7 days, according to the contract, assuming everything's normal, just like a mortgage application should occur within the first 7 days of getting it under contract. Title runs a search. And like I said, they're going to find a number of different things that are associated with the property, and they're going to reach out to you to reach out to the seller to say, we need more information about these things, right? They're going to give what's called a title commitment. And then they're also going to show you what comes up on the title search. And that title search is going to show Here's who owns the property. Here's who they bought it from and when they bought it from them. Here's any type of, mortgages that exist on it, any type of liens that exist on it, any type of encumbrances, etc. And then they're going to reach out to you and you're going to say, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I need you to provide me with explanations for this or for mortgage payoffs or payoffs for these items. So that's really what you're doing. It's honestly a waiting game. Sometimes what happens is they'll say, John Smith is the seller, and they'll say, hey, we found a John Smith in Virginia who is in prison. Is that the seller? And the seller has to write an email saying, I am not the John Smith in Virginia who's in prison. Thank you. And that takes care of that item. So there are some things that are super simple. There are some things where it's we need something official from the bank showing that if we sell it on Tuesday, how much would we owe the bank on Tuesday? A mortgage payoff. That's a long answer. The short answer is you're reacting to whatever title asks you for. Anytime I get a deal under contract, I put together a roadmap. And the roadmap, okay. So anytime I get an agreement of sale, I put this together. This is, first action item I do. I also send this to the other side to let them know, here's my interpretation of the agreement of sale. Please check this against your notes and let me know if you have any discrepancies at all. We need to be on the same page moving forward here, because these dates and this contract are legally binding. And I don't want there to be any issue. And I would rather take time up front, make sure we're on the same page, make sure everybody understands, than to have to deal with a hiccup or a roadblock later. So I put together the deal, right? And I've made a, basically idiot proof over here by putting where am I coming up with this information? At what line item in the agreement of sale am I finding these items, right? So execution date, the day that the final signature happens. Okay, day one is the day after the final signature happens. And then we have what is the settlement date. So this is just your real basic overview, the property address, et cetera. And then based off of the agreement of sale, we have different items. Like the first deposit for this particular deal was due 14 days after the execution date. Okay, so what does that mean as far as dates? That was February 1st. Okay, we'll get to notes below, but it basically says how much and who it's owed to. Okay, they got to complete a mortgage application within 7 days. So what date is that? Okay, we ended up doing a CTA reflecting a new day, but where is that located? That's 143 of the AOS, line 143. What day do they have to reply to inspections? They have to submit it by February 9th, day 21. When do we have to reply to that reply and finish in negotiations about the inspection? Day 28. If we're not in an agreement by the time this happens, buyer has a final decision on day 30, right? 2 days after that. Okay. When is the second deposit due? When is the mortgage commitment due? In this case, there was no appraisal, not specified, but it's built into the mortgage contingency. So there's no date that's specific to it, but it is going to be part of them getting a mortgage. Title commitment, no official date, but we want to make sure it's cleared. When we schedule a walkthrough and when we contact utilities to get it out of our name, and then there's just a bunch of notes. Right, so you'll see that from the seller side, there's really not a lot of action items. Right? You're responding, you're making sure deposits get in. You're making sure mortgage applications were applied for. You're making sure you're negotiating on inspections. You're making sure a second deposit was submitted. You're making sure that a mortgage commitment was received. You're making sure that everything on title is taken care of. And then you're just showing up at closings. You're contacting utilities to make sure that you're not paying for this dude's water or electricity thereafter, after closing.
And what about this
reaction stuff?
What about the seller's deed packet?
So if for whatever reason the seller cannot attend closing, and that's a question you're going to want to ask the seller, then you're going to reach out to the title company and tell them, I need a seller deed packet. My seller cannot attend closing. They will email you a deed packet, which is 95% of the things that the seller needs to sign. They need to sign that in front of a notary and send it back to the title company. They need to have the originals on the day of closing. In that deed packet are things like the actual deed itself, right? How you want to get paid, that you attest that you are who you are, a copy of their license, who's going to sign the final ALTA and or CD on their behalf, which typically is the real estate agent. A number of things that the notary will be able to walk them through. Like, you don't need to know anything about it other than, are you able to attend settlement or not? And if not, I'll get you a deed packet from the title company and make sure you have the originals to them on or before closing. And then you show up and sign on their behalf.
So they would need to get it signed at a notary though, for sure though.
It has to be notarized 1000%. It doesn't have to go, they can have a notary come to them, but it has to be notarized. So for example, the duplex that we just shot the video at, that seller lives in California.
Oh, wow.
There's no way he's coming over. It doesn't make sense. He's not coming here for closing. But he's going to sign a deed packet out there. They will include in their deed packet an overnight notice so that he can ship it right back to them. And I'll sign on his behalf the final numbers. Why you got me on the screen? Here we go. I need to request it. So again, this is what it looks like. Title for this property. They did a title report, and this is what it showed, right? That there is one mortgage and one municipal lien. So please provide the lender information, and please provide the mortgage and any information about the municipal lien. They got the municipal lien. I had to reach out to the seller to say, give me a mortgage payoff. Hi all. Seller cannot attend closing. Please send over a deed packet. And now, as soon as I get it, I just forward it to him and give him instructions that, hey, this needs to be completed in the presence of a notary. They'll know how to fill it out on your behalf. Let me know if you want help coordinating a notary to come to your house, or if you want to go to your local bank or, Notary Republic, wherever. Like, it's really basic, but my goal is to make it as easy as possible. So I always offer to hold their hand while they do it, but it's really simple. Google notary near me or mobile notary, and you'll get 100 different options.
What exactly is conveyancing?
Conveyancing is simply all of the back end things that occur during the deal. Like, we need a payoff that is from the city. So instead of it's basically admin tasks that are related specifically to the transaction. So in order to convey something means to give something from one to the other, right? So conveyancing is assisting in the process of giving the property from one party to the other. So they're just doing like admin tasks that are needed to get from one portion to the other. So you need a UNO from the city of Philadelphia in order to, convey a property from one party to the other that shows there's no violations. The conveyancing department would order the UNO. You need a utility payoff from PGW, from PWD, from PICO. They will help facilitate that type of order. They will help facilitate getting the mortgage payoff. They will help facilitate getting the notary and all that stuff handled. They're just helping with conveying the property, and they do all the admin things. And a lot of times the title company will say, who's your conveyancer? Or we're happy to the conveyancing on your behalf for a nominal fee of $150 or something like that.